To begin with, it is important to note that the people of Babel had common ancestors, Adam and Eve. These parents existed before they were born, and even though there were many families with different parents, there was a great bond. These families were of one language. There was nothing like a major language spoken by some tribes or a minor language spoken by a minority group. Every one of them spoke the same language. They understood one another, and their understanding was more than just words. They knew what it meant when any amongst them cried. They didn't need to ask what was wrong when a person laughed. They knew when something is not well with any of them. The people of Babel understood every action made by each one of them. They could express their feelings and thoughts. They understood gestures, expressions, tones, and emotions, and they communicated effectively with one another. These people were too united. They had one voice, one mind, and one thought. The people had no houses of their own, but they had tents. They were sojourners who moved from one place to another, as far as they could find comfort. They always looked for a good environment to plant, eat, and drink. Not just themselves, but their animals too. However, there was a time they got to a land called Shinar, and these people began to imagine vain things in their hearts. This was years after God Almighty destroyed the earth because of the wickedness of man and saved only Noah and his family, whom he found righteous and blameless. It was through the family of Noah that a great nation was built, and they grew mightily that they began to scheme evils. And they grew to the extent that they decided not to live in tents again, but to live in brick houses. They decided to make bricks and put them inside the fire to make them very hard to break. They started using bricks instead of stones to build their houses, and they used tar to hold the bricks together instead of cement. They were sojourners who moved from one place to another, as far as they could find comfort. They always looked for a good environment to plant, eat, and drink. Not just themselves, but their animals too. However, there was a time they got to a land called Shinar, and these people began to imagine vain things in their hearts. This was years after God Almighty destroyed the earth because of the wickedness of man and saved only Noah and his family, whom he found righteous and blameless. It was through the family of Noah that a great nation was built, and they grew mightily that they began to scheme evils. And they grew to the extent that they decided not to live in tents again, but to live in brick houses. They decided to make bricks and put them inside the fire to make them very hard to break. They started using bricks instead of stones to build their houses, and they used tar to hold the bricks together instead of cement. They were very creative in their thinking and easily executed their plans because they were speaking one language. They were so bonded together that they saw nothing stopping them from achieving greater exploits. Probably they saw that they did well for themselves, as the building project they did came out excellently well. They called themselves together again and suggested building a very big city that they would live in, and they also suggested that they build a tower that will reach up to heaven. All these activities were to make a name for themselves, to become famous in the whole of the earth. Whoever brought that idea must have concluded that the part of the earth they resided in was not the best place to be. What else were they looking for? They had good food to eat, even fruits were in abundance, there was water to drink, their animals multiplied robustly, and they were in a safe environment. They lived in peace, and there was no war to fight or battles to go to. Their hearts were just stirred in rebellion against God's plan and instructions. Genesis 1-28, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Even after the flood, he still told the remnants to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. But the people had other plans. They wanted to be rooted in a location without spreading. They wanted to meet with God and do what Lucifer thought in his heart. They would dethrone God. So once more they began to make bricks and fire them very well. They made bricks of stone and tar for mortar, and they began building the blocks. Old men and women were watching, giving wise ideas on how to go about it, while children played and helped out occasionally too. Women cooked and waited on the men. The young and able-bodied men were going up and down building the tower. The giant tower was coming to shape, and the excitement began to mount also. Everyone was there, the young and the old, either building or helping the builders. All they wanted was to be in a place together and not separated from one another. That sounded and looked like a brilliant idea. They wanted to build a family so strong that it would be so difficult to break. However, God was not excited about the building project. His plan for them was to fill the whole earth, to spread across the board. The Almighty also noted that they were making progress with the tower. He realized that if he allowed them, they will do whatever they wanted, and this may even make them think of taking over heaven. So God called an emergency meeting. He asked the heavenly hosts what should be done. Then they reached a consensus, and they decided to scatter their language. They agreed to confuse their tongue. Suddenly, there was a misunderstanding. So men started fighting and exchanging words, and others gathered to settle the misunderstanding, but instead of it getting settled, they did not even understand what was said. There was panic everywhere. There was an uproar and noise everywhere. Confused, everyone ran to ask what the confusion was all about, and they could not even understand a single explanation given. Only a few people could understand what was said by some few individuals. As expected, the building stopped immediately after the chaos started, and so the Lord separated the people from one another. They went to live in different lands all over the earth. They stopped building the city for themselves. That is why people called the city Babel. It has been a place of reminder, a place where the misunderstanding began, and it was named the Tower of Babel, meaning the Tower of Confusion or noisy confusion. It was because the Lord confused all the people of the world, and He gave them different languages to speak. From that time, the Lord separated the people from each other so that they lived in different places all over the earth. Since that time, humans have been scattered all over the earth. They have subdued the earth and have not been in one location, and there has been a diversity of language. Before the confusion, the many people you would find together were people of the same language, people who understood the language of the world, and they communicated well. However, the people were selfish, they wanted a name for themselves, and they were proud. They aimed to build something that represented their great abilities and establish a famous reputation among the other tribes. They wanted to be the envy of everyone across the land.